In this much shorter video, I'm going to run down some health law research that LEAP 3 students will see this semester. Specifically, we're going to look at the anti-kickback statute, certificates of need, and I'm also going to clarify what sorts of things you'll have to research on your own. So beginning with the anti-kickback statute from the law school site, we'll tag ourselves over into Westlaw in the gray bar. And notice where we are at right now. This is a little bit different than your usual homepage because I've just clicked on practice areas. So this curated list of content on health law is going to be our starting point. So go to the homepage, practice areas, health law. And I've just run a search here for the anti-kickback statute. You're going to see here in this monster list that there is a secondary source that might be pretty illuminating. Turns out health lawyers are interested in this, and when they get together and have these conferences about fundamentals of health law, they're going to go through the history of the Medicare anti-kickback statute. They're going to analyze the elements. They're going to cite some cases and discuss them. There's also a regulation in there as well too, but check those things out because that will take you through, just like any good secondary source, what your research process should be on the anti-kickback statute. It'll even include things like diagrams. Why? Because if you look at it visually, maybe that's one way of figuring out whether some arrangement is fishy or not. So you start with a secondary source, you get to the statute, no big deal, right? So by way of quick review, notes of decisions, right? The words and the phrases and the legal issues that have been litigated by the parties, like what is bribery? Well, chances are there's a case about it. You can see it there in the margins. Bribery is one of the notes of decision categories. What about the fact that this is one section and there are probably many that have to deal with this issue? Remember that white sheet of paper with the arrow to the side brings up super browse so you can see the whole text in context. The effective date of February 9th, 2018. Why does that matter? Because your secondary source was before that date, so it needs to take into account any of the changes that you see in that text, right? Secondary source tells you you can't do it, but the text says that you can. Obviously, the primary source, the primary law controls, so be aware of that effective date. Easiest way to compare texts under history, graphical statute. You can click on it right there and see a list of the law at a particular date and time. You can see it right there, the law and the public law that amended it, and you can see what it was back before 2018 and obviously the current version on Westlaw. Quick preview for Westlaw Edge, which will be coming to law students on January 1st, 2019. It has an automatic statutes compare tool, which is totally awesome, but I'm not going to talk about it. You can look it up on the YouTubes. You can ask me about it, or you can just wait till January or when we do some lunch and learns before then. Other ways to find the anti-kickback statute, because I showed you one, which was to find a secondary source. Obviously, you could punch in words into the web search bar and click till you find something useful. Not the most sophisticated thing. Second way to find the anti-kickback statute is the USCA index. Remember the statutes index, which Westlaw has for the US Code, CFR, and all 50 states. But keep in mind, there are lots of anti-kickback statutes. You might be looking for a specific one. And then the last one is to consult other secondary sources. ALR Federal has something about the anti-kickback statute, and obviously it will cite the statute and the cases will cite the statute. However you do it, find the anti-kickback statute. Be aware as well that there are 6 things on practical law. I looked through those, but I think the one that I connected you to in the last video is probably the most useful, and that there's also 6,000 secondary sources. So key citing, probably a little less useful in terms of finding useful secondary sources on anti-kickback statute. Just check out the ones that I gave you, and if you don't think they're so hot, check out the reference attorneys for their advice. Some takeaways from the anti-kickback statute research. Remember to look under the practice areas for health law. Remember that there's all sorts of secondary sources for niche areas of law, and not all of them may be on Westlaw. Thomson Reuters publishes tons of stuff, and for various reasons, some stuff doesn't end up on Westlaw. You can always check in print to see if there isn't a practice guide for your particular question. And remember that in January, we will totally be talking about Westlaw Edge and the statutes compare tool because it's really awesome. Now on to certificates of need. And the easiest way to get connected to certificates of need and to start your research on there is definitely through the Ohio secondary sources. From there, I just ran a general language search for certificate of need and clicked on the first section that I saw there because, of course, generally, great place to start. Also, in the quick preview, it told me about statutes and rules. So obviously, I'm going to be looking at both the Ohio Administrative Code, which has the regs, and the Ohio statutes. Noting as well that within that secondary source, it tells me what the statutes are, and it also gives me the chapter of the Ohio Admin Code to look up. You can also get to this from the 50 state surveys, run a search for certificate of need and get this. It, of course, will also connect you to the Ohio statutes that way. Now that you're at the statute, I want to emphasize something that you'll notice here under table of contents. It's right next to that alarm bell in the middle bar, in the middle of your screen. And what you'll see here when you pull up the table of contents is that certain sections have red flags by them. That's very interesting. Within a statute, you will also see references to the Ohio Administrative Code. Why? Because the code is going to give authority to an administrative agency to interpret the rules further or to promulgate a procedure for deciding things under the rules. And then you'll see where that is. So Ohio Admin Code 3701 is a good place to look. Within that section of the administrative code, the same oldies but goodies from Westlaw, notes of decisions, history, citing references, all those things that were things for statutes are also a thing here. Along with that table of contents, which indicates that certain types of things might not be the law anymore. A couple other places where you can look. The Health Law Practice Guide is a secondary source within the health law texts and treatises. So if you show up in that health law area and click around a little bit, it might connect you to some information about certificates of need. And so you can see that section there under number 3. And then within the American Health Law Association, remember how we looked at one conference paper? There's another conference paper that talks about buying and selling skilled nursing and assisted living facilities that talks about all the types of things that you should be doing in the context of those types of purchases. Now, note that I did not tell you a lot about the underlying law. One, because I'm not a health lawyer. I've never done an asset purchase agreement for a skilled nursing facility or anything like that in my life. So what I did do is hopefully point you in the right direction to get started. Specifically to read the certificate of need and try and figure out if it has internal inconsistencies. Just like how drafting assistant is not going to identify those factual or legal errors, there may be problems with the certificate of need or conditions on it that might affect your analysis. So read it to figure out if there's internal inconsistencies. Then try and figure out, is it compliant with the statutes and rules? We've given you some statutes and rules to read. We've given you a secondary source or two that interprets them. And we've also shown you the tools that you can kind of manually look through those sections to put together a practice guide yourself. Lots of other stuff we'd love to talk with you about, so contact us via lawschool.westlaw.com or telephone live chat or email the reference attorneys. Thanks for watching and good luck this semester.